Mine are tears in times of sorrow, darkness not yet understood. Through the valley I must travel, where I see no earthly good. Mine is peace that flows from heaven, and the strength in times of need. I know my pain will not be wasted. Christ completes his work in me. These are lines from a song that is my favorite. It's called Christ is Mine Forevermore by City Alight. And they say a lot about my own story. Good morning, church. My name is Musiimenta. I am 22. I am the firstborn of 3 from my mom and dad. And I am going to tell you how God has eventfully used my life to draw me to himself. That every event that has happened in my life, right from when I was born, was designed by him to just bring me to himself and change my heart. And that's my biggest testimony, the change of my heart. Growing up, I did not grow up with my mother in the first 3 to 4 years of my life. I grew up with my grandmother. And after those years, I went back to stay with my mother. And when I got there, I didn't even know the word mother came to me. Like, I first heard of mother when my mother came to pick me from my grandmother. That's when I knew there is actually a mother and a father. But for me, I knew that I had one parent and they were my grandmother. And since I was staying with her alone, so it didn't add up because these people were not around. So I got to stay with my mother, and I had to begin school. So I got to school and people had their fathers, and it hit me that I actually did not have a dad. So I go back home and I ask my mom where my dad was, and the expression on her face when I asked her that spoke volumes at that point. She told me, your father really doesn't want to see you. It's not like he cares if you live or you died. It didn't affect me at that point because maybe the need of a father had not come to my mind yet. And time happens when my mom was unable to take care of me, so she sent me to my aunt. And that was the beginning of my misery. My aunt had children, little children, and I had to take care of them, and she really battered me. She abused me as a child, and I couldn't take it. I remember trying suicide as a child. I don't know what age that was, but I tried suicide. And there was a night when she beat me so badly that I had to escape in the night and go back home. And I told my mother, I would rather stay here with you. I am not going to go back that side. And that was the time I asked myself where my father was. My auntie's children had a daddy. My schoolmates had daddies. Where was my dad? Where was he? It hurt me so much that he was nowhere to be found, yet I had very good stories about him. He was a rich man who had everything figured out, but he was not with me. And I always thought that most of my misery happened because he was not there. Because I always told myself, if my father was here, all these things would not be happening to me. He would take care of me. He would do all these things. But he did not come. I remember waiting for my dad for around 15 years, and my dad did not come. But when I was in my senior 5, my father came home. I came back from school and I found my father home. And when I was told that my father was home, the first thing was I was happy. I had these whole things I wanted to tell my dad. I had these, parents play a big role in our lives. So I had my dreams. I had prayed for this for a very long time, and here he was. But I didn't know that my joy was going to be short-lived, because everything I had about my dad before he came was actually going to come true. My dad did not come because he wanted us. It was his own agenda. And he made my life difficult, and I did not like him. I detested him. I remember telling him to go back to where he came from, because he just messed me up. So, and at that time I was already saved, but I got saved in my senior one. That was in 2014. That's when I gave my life to Christ. But we had never tackled that part. Me and God had never tackled that part of my parents, because it was so painful that I felt like if I was to deal with it, then it would mean I would have to forgive someone, and I did not want to do that. I did not want to do that. I know God was going to say, you forgive. I wanted a proper explanation of why all these things were happening. 2020, I come to campus. I was at Kampala International University. I was doing a bachelor's degree in laws. And I remember being a part of a church, and we had this, I was able to be a part of some program called Discipleship Intense Training with Pastor Dave Carroll. And when we were there, his book, The Father's Heart, already the book is saying the Father's Heart, and the word Father was already distorted in my mind. For me, it was distorted. And it brought so much pain to me that I did not want to hear it. But when we went through that discipleship training, I got to learn about the love of God, that God had loved me, that Romans 5:8 says that for while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That God did not wait for me to become a good person for him to love me. He loved me when I was still a sinner, and I did not deserve it. And he has loved me even through. And I could trace back and see that God had actually loved me. I survived suicide. I survived those beatings. I was still alive. And for a change to happen, I had to love my dad. I had to love him. Not because he was doing good things, but because God had called me to love my father, because God is love. And I had understood that Christ loves me perfectly. And it's only when you are loved by a perfect God can you be able to pass on love to someone else. I was determined to go back home and love my dad. And this was a hard decision. Friends, if you're planning to love someone, they're not planning to love you. So it's hard. It's only God who can help you. And I remember praying to God and asking him to make ways for us to be able to reconcile with my dad. And God actually made those ways. When I went back, it was hard, but there was a day around August, my dad got an accident, and he was vulnerable. And when someone is vulnerable, that's the best time. So my dad, I remember praying to God and saying, I want you to heal my dad, not just physically, but spiritually too. And I want you to use me to be able to share with him your love, because I know Christ had loved us. And because I know at some point in my heart of hearts, I knew something was wrong. Maybe my dad was broken. And how can a broken person love another broken person? They will just hurt them. So I used that time to take care of my dad. I prayed for him every day. And the days I thought he wasn't listening, but he actually was. And And after like a month of that period, I remember my dad stopping me and asking me a question. And he's like, Mercy, where do you get the strength to love a stranger like me? This was my dad. But he knew that me and him were like strangers because of the relationship that we had. I remember telling him that I only loved him because Christ loved me first. I remember telling my dad that God had loved him so much, and God was passing on his love to him through me. And at that point, my dad gave his life to Christ. Amen. And we did a lot of Bible study together. And the question I had asked myself earlier, why God had given me a dad like mine, I had an answer to it now. God had given me my dad to love him. That was it. To love him and to tell him about Christ. I don't know what reasons others have for having their dads, but for me that was it. I knew that God had ordained my father to just be loved by me, his daughter. And my dad transformed. He changed his life. He apologized to everyone he had wronged. He called me every day, my daughter, let's do Bible study. And he did a lot of Bible study with me. And God used me at that point to just be his guide. It's not how it's supposed to be, but I believe God wanted it that way. And then a year later, my dad passed on. God called my dad home. It broke me. I had only a year with my dad as a loving dad, and I'm grateful for every bit of it. And I thank God that there is hope that I'm going to see him one day. I thank God for the gift of salvation for my dad. That he did not die unsaved. That God saved him. Isn't the Lord wonderful? And that's how my dad passed on. I was actually already here. That was last semester. And then one would ask the question, how did I end up here? Because I was at KIU doing my own things, but I believe the Lord got me here. And the story of how I got here amazes me too up to now. When I was in my first year, second semester doing law, I got this deep conviction. I wanted to be in a Bible university, but I didn't know how that was going to unfold or how it was going to work. All I knew, I wanted to come somewhere in a Bible university. I had not heard about African Bible University at all. I had never heard about it. And I remember searching, and all the schools that I searched were outside Uganda, because I did not trust I didn't trust to go in any seminary in Uganda because of whatever had been going on. So, but that was a plan I had for after my law degree. I was supposed to do that after my law degree. I didn't think my parents would want me to drop whatever I was doing and then do something else. But also I didn't know where the money was going to come from. So I was telling myself I will study, finish, and then if I'm able to take care of myself, I will be able to take myself to a Bible university. So I remember there was a conference, Living Word Conference, 2022, the one that was in January, Alive and Active Living Word Conference. A pastor friend of mine, Pastor Dennis Mogume, put it on his status, and he's like, anyone who wants to go for Living Word Conference. And he was, I think, like advertising it and saying Conrad Mbewe was going to be in Uganda. And I was excited, and I remember telling him I wanted to go. And he actually paid for my fee, the fee for the conference. And when I reached there, Dr. Shannon came in some session and was announcing about the STC, that pastor training at SOS. And I think I did not hear the announcement properly, so I went to him running and told him, before I would get to him, I was already there, but he was doing something else. So I tell him, you know what, I want to be a part of this. And as I was still talking, I began reading through, and the first qualification was you had to be male. And I wasn't male. I wasn't male. And I looked so disappointed. And then I told him, I think whatever I'm saying doesn't make sense now because I am not male. And then he's like, no, it's okay. You can tell me. And then he asked me to talk, and then I was telling him about my passion for being in a Bible university. And he's like, how about I take you to ABU? And that's how ABU came into the picture. And the rest is history. God got me here. And he took care of every single need of mine, and he has taken care of me. And one would still wonder, why did I want to come here? Why am I doing education? I want to be a missionary. I have someone I admire. I don't know if you know of a lady called Elizabeth Elliot. I admire that lady. And I want to use my teaching skills to serve Christ anywhere that he is going to send me. And that is my desire. And I know I'm going to get it here. I know I'm going to learn and become better, qualified in a way that God wants me to. A lot of things will still happen in my life, but I know God has designed each one of them, painful or not painful. Elizabeth Elliot says that God is not going to protect you from anything that is going to make you more like Christ. And I know God will continue to guide my path. Thank you.